Really kept you waiting, huh? Denis Villeneuve's Dune is a sequel to the 2010 masterpiece by Ray William Johnson, Dune Your Mom. The film has been long awaited since its announcement, due to the story's reputation as unfilmable, then due to pandemic-related delays, also because people weren't 100% keen on the 1984 Dune, because it's a very David Lynch film. I know that many of you watching my channel came here for Dune, the audiobook I was making, so you might be interested in what I have to say about it, because I've essentially read the book 4 times over in the space of about 2 years. I'll speak about the movie itself in the first part, which will be spoiler-free, and in the second part of this video I will speak at length about how the film compares to the book, which will contain spoilers for both the book and the movie. As a standalone film, Dune is reasonably good. The production quality of this movie is absolutely phenomenal. It's obvious that a huge amount of effort went into everything. Every element of this movie and its design had vast amounts of care put in. This includes the designs of the props, costumes, vehicles, vistas, special effects, everything. The visuals look fantastic, and there are no shortage of frankly spectacular scenes throughout the entire movie. The film leans heavily into its use of spectacle, which is mostly to its credit. The special effects too are up to the standards of a modern Hollywood blockbuster, meaning they look very good. I think my only complaint here is that the effect for shields looks rather generic. You should go and watch the Corridor Digital video about that. The soundtrack is one of the most unique scores I've heard in ages. Hans Zimmer has really outdone himself here, creating a rich audio accompaniment to the very ambitious visuals. One minor gripe I have is that the audio mixing was off in a couple of places, so I couldn't understand what characters were saying, but this only happened once or twice, and it could have been the cinema that I saw it in. To be honest, I've never watched a movie in IMAX before. The performances given in this movie end up being somewhere between adequate and good. Timothy Chalamet, the guy who plays Paul, he was sometimes good, but he was also sometimes quite bland. Rebecca Ferguson absolutely nailed the sort of maternal role of Lady Jessica. Oscar Isaac did reasonably well as Duke Leto, as did Javier Bardem as Stilgar. Special mention to Sharon Duncan Brewster as Dr. Kynes too. I found Zendaya to be very bland as Chani, but she didn't get much screen time, so I can forgive that for now. But I do think that Zendaya is a very overrated actress. My main gripe with the performances has to be Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho. Momoa seems to just play the same character in pretty much every movie he's in, which I found a bit disappointing. It felt like I was watching Aquaman in Dune, which I didn't really like. Overall, I can recommend this movie, although keep in mind that it is bloody long. I went to an 8:30 p.m. screening, and I didn't get out of it until about midnight. So yeah, just keep in mind it's a very long movie. So spoilers from here until the end of the video. You have been warned. The movie has severely trimmed down the story from the source material. Basically, every subplot has been cut, and when compared to the book, it makes the whole sequence of events feel rushed. It feels like the Atreides are on Arrakis for maybe a week, whereas the book gives the impression that it's more like a few months. I understand that the movie only has so much time to tell the story, but when it spends so much time on spectacle, it feels like they're misprioritizing their time. The huge ceremony scene at the beginning with the Emperor's Herald, the parade when the Atreides arrive, it all feels like time that could have been used to include one of the subplots or some of the context that makes the book so great. The political context of the galaxy is definitely lacking too. The Spacing Guild is mentioned once, or maybe twice, but their monopoly on space is not presented at all. The mystery of Seleucus Secundus is lost as it is outright labelled an Imperial Army planet when they show it to us. Almost every character aside from Paul and maybe Jessica get this treatment too. Thafir Hawat and Gurney Halleck get heavily sidelined in favour of Duncan Idaho, so that his heroic death to hold off the Sardaukar towards the end of the film is more meaningful. This emotional payoff feels a little bit cheap, and I believe this will have severe ramifications for the second movie, given the role of Thafir and Gurney later in the story. There's also no mention of Halleck being a minstrel warrior, and the film doesn't give him a baliset or have him sing even once. The Harkonnens get this treatment too, with Feyd-Rautha not being present in this movie at all. Piter de Vries is barely present in the film, and I don't think his name is ever used. The movie also cuts some of the elements that make the Baron disgusting. They retain his descriptions being grotesquely fat and requiring suspensors to move, but unsurprisingly they cut his noncing from the film, because Hollywood still isn't comfortable portraying powerful people in positions of authority as nonces. The 1984 Dune did something similar, with the heart plugs. There is a weird spider thing with human hands, though, which may be an attempt to make him seem worse and more sinister and sadistic, but it could also be a nod to the Bene Tleilax, but we don't know for sure. One huge missed opportunity of this film is the traitor subplot. So in the book, we know that Dr. Yue is the traitor, but the rest of the characters don't. The choice to not use internal monologues meant that the betrayal of Dr. Yue could have been a surprise to the audience, as well as to the characters. But in the film, we've seen Yue maybe 3 times before his betrayal, and there's no mention of the possibility of a traitor in the Atreides ranks. We also don't get the chance to get to know him in the same way as we do in the book, as his conversation with Jessica about his wife has been cut from the film. The lack of the traitor subplot is going to have ramifications for later in the story, as the Baron Harkonnen in the story manipulated Hawat into believing Jessica was the traitor in order to recruit him so he can have revenge on her for destroying the Atreides. I really don't know how the movie is going to handle this, as Hawat in the film doesn't have that suspicion of Jessica. I think my greatest complaint is the cutting, or at least the de-emphasizing, of the theme of a son growing to understand his father. This is by far my favourite theme from the book, as when I first read Dune as a teenager, I didn't have the greatest opinion of my father. I was going through the screw you dad, I won't do what you tell me phase, and the presence of this theme in the book started me down the path to a better relationship with my own father. The omission of this theme from the movie is especially disappointing. Related to this, I feel that the character of Kynes is done dirty in this movie too. The movie omits much, if not all, of the dual identity subplots surrounding Liet Kynes. The movie also changes Kynes' death, having her killed by Sardaukar and a worm, instead of the touching send-off given to him in the book. Since the father-son theme is omitted, I don't feel like the sex-swapping of the character is at all important, but if that theme had been included, then I feel it may have had an impact. Also, all of Kynes' father's lines are given to Stilgar in a sort of flash-forward that Paul has, which I didn't think was amazing, given that there's sort of a context and knowledge to Kynes' father being the ecologist, and Stilgar is just a freeman, but whatever, that's a creative choice, I guess. There are no shortage of scenes from the book that are cut to fit the runtime. The strategy conference is cut ridiculously short, as is Paul's last training before his departure to Arrakis. The banquet is cut completely, which means that we get less of an impression of the covert Harkonnen presence on Arrakis. The wet plant conservatory isn't in the film, and the palm tree thing has been changed to not be about the decadence of the ruling class. The spice harvester part of the story has been changed from an exploration of Leto's character and Paul's view of him into a scene about Paul tripping balls while learning about spice harvesting. Fighting in the film is also not accurate to the book. The swordplay with the shields is far too quick, and the movie lacks an explanation of lasguns and shields, which makes the scene where Duncan Idaho is dodging a lasgun in a shielded ornithopter almost meaningless to the average audience member. However, to us who have read the book, we know that if the lasgun hits him, then the whole city of Arrakeen gets essentially nuked. There's no mention of atomics either, so that dimension is missing from the film entirely. The Sardaukar are not disguised in Harkonnen uniform, and the movie really does overuse their suspensor descending gimmick. The artillery effects look cool, especially with the shield-piercing effect, but that's also not faithful to the book at all. I mean, the point of the use of artillery was that they caught them by surprise, and all the shields were down so they couldn't stop the artillery shells. Having the artillery shells pierce the shield while it's cool is not really faithful to the use of artillery, and it makes you wonder, well, why doesn't everyone just use artillery in the Dune universe, at least of the movies? Aesthetically as well, the swords in the movie look cool and futuristic, but in practice they would not be practical weapons, as there are almost no guards on these weapons. Most of them resemble angular machetes instead of any kind of practical fighting sword, and I know this because I own rather a lot of practical fighting swords. That said, I will give an honourable mention to the Atreides' use of spears on the steps when they're fighting off the Harkonnen troopers. That was nice to see. I like to see spears in movies, especially in futuristic ones. There are other things from the book that are missing from the film that I would like to mention, but if I do, then this would be a much longer video, and it would take probably twice as long for me to dredge them out of my memory. I'd also need to watch the film again, and I don't have HBO Max, and I wouldn't dream. I'd never even consider pirating the movie. Lord, no. Overall, Dune is a good movie, and I would recommend it to general audiences, especially if it gets more people to read the book. The differences from the book are tolerable, and they are kind of necessary for the pacing of the film. To faithfully adapt the book would probably require a couple of seasons of a TV show, roughly one episode per chapter, probably about an hour per episode, with some condensing. I can even recommend the movie to long-time book fans, with the disclaimer that they have made concessions to time and the medium of film. The visuals and the sound do make up for it most of the time, though. More content to come. I've got some scripts in the works and a new book that I'd like to read to all of you, so once my hangover wears off in the new year, I'm going to start bulk recording that, and who knows, maybe we'll get to a weekly upload schedule again. But that book is one that the copyright people shouldn't be able to get me on. But we'll see. Anyway, toodaloo.